The Game of Zen explores the often overlooked ways in which professional, personal, and spiritual growth are interrelated. We dive deep into the life teachings of the Buddha and the mindfulness practices of Zen, revealing how they can help us dramatically expand our possibilities for wholehearted work, life, and play.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Game of Zen podcast. My name is Scott Berman, checking in from Philadelphia, PA. What's happening, Paul? How are things in Boulder?
Hey, things are going really good. We're after our Memorial Day weekend. We had the big Boulder road race here over the weekend and a nice creek festival, and got to spend a lot of time with the family over the weekend. So feeling pretty good.
Awesome.
How
Yeah,
about
things
you?
are good. Things are great here. Summer's here and definitely the weather's great and I'm getting outdoors and hiking a lot and, kind of a chill Memorial Day, but it was nice. Nice to have Monday off too.
Sweet.
Right. Awesome. Well, today's episode is about beginner's mind. And I always, I first learned about this reading the book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind a couple of years ago. And the idea of that everything is fresh and new and to look at it that way, it's very challenging, but I thought it's very rewarding. And I thought we could dive into it today a little bit. So let's start off by talking about where this concept came from and how does it apply to Zen and Buddhism?
Yeah. Well, I think we want to honor that you and I decided that we weren't going to do a whole lot of preparation for this episode, and we thought we would just jump in and do it fresh. So we both are going to give beginner's mind to this episode. We really don't have a script at all for this,
Yep.
so we're just going to wing it. Yeah, so Zen is just very astute. I guess I would say that the teachings of Zen are really astute about how our ideas of the world, really get in the way of a full engagement with the world. And so beginner's mind just means to face the world without the filter of our ideas, our plans, our knowledge, our so-called knowledge, and to face it fresh. Um, and it's easier said than done because we just learn to interact with the world through these filters and ideas. At a certain level we're almost living in an abstracted environment, right? We're not fully present, we're not fully embodied, we're not fully engaged. So this is a very very direct and powerful pointing to say, no, don't depend upon these filters and prior conceptions of things unconsciously. Notice the way that they're affecting your orientation in the world.
Yeah, and I think about a couple episodes ago, we talked about impermanence and how everything is constantly changing and we're different. And this is a new day and a new episode. And, it's a new month, June is coming up and May will be over and so on. So it really helps for me to think about things with beginner's mind. But to your point, though, it is challenging because we also are creatures of habit and routine. A lot of the things that we do every day are similar to what we did yesterday, right? So how do we I feel like it's a training and a practice to look at things with beginner's mind. So how have you gone about in your life training yourself on this?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'll note that, this word habit is one thing that a lot of Zen teachers point out as the real mechanism that's causing us a lot of suffering. Zen master Hakuin said it's habit-ridden consciousness that produces our suffering. Habit-ridden consciousness. He doesn't even talk about toxins, right? We've talked about the three poisons and attachment and craving, aversion, and ignorance, and all these things. He doesn't mention these things. He says it's habit-ridden. It's our habits of body and mind that really are at the source of everything. So that's what we want to address, and that's exactly what is not beginner's mind when we're operating through our habits of mind, right? We're on autopilot, or we're working out through somatic patterns, right? Somatic habits that we have within our body. So you asked me like how you deal with those. Well, it takes a discipline. It takes a discipline of body and mind in order to see our habits, right? It's kind of you've probably heard the metaphor about for meditation. It's like putting a snake into a bamboo tube. By using when you put that snake in the tube, it wriggles. It's trying to wriggle, but instead of wriggling, it's just hitting up against the inside of the bamboo tube, right? Whereas outside of the tube, it wriggles, but outside of the tube, it doesn't really feel its skin. Inside the tube, it totally feels its skin. So we have the artifice of a meditation practice, which in this metaphor I'm using, this example, would be the form that we're taking with our body, but also with our time, the
Hmm.
schedule meditation practice. And we see the way that we hit up against those things, the way our body resists being still, the way we want to do something else with the time instead of meditating. These are all ways that we're now seeing our mind and our body in action. Now,
Hmm.
what are we're actually seeing our habits. That's actually the habit. So a
Hmm.
discipline of practice, and you could call this a routine, you could call it a practice, you could even call it a ceremony, something that you do repetitively, but with the intention of seeing and embodying what's going on with yourself moment by moment.
Hmm.
And when you see these habits now, that's the first step, and I say that's the first and the biggest step to unhooking from those
Hmm.
habits, because now we can put our energy, we can put our intention into other places.
Yeah, I think with the beginner's mind too, it's like once I make that switch, I change the channel, change the station in my head, and look at things differently. Like it happens quickly, and the benefit is almost immediate. And it
Yeah.
could be anything
Mhm.
from like taking a hike on a trail that I've done 100 times, or it
Mhm.
could be just, making dinner or something. And I think, okay, this is a new dinner that I'm cooking and I'm going to make it a little bit differently or something. And then I'm automatically like happier about it or something. I don't know how to explain that, but it's like, I look at once I train myself to look at it differently, I feel better about whatever action I'm doing and I get more joy out of it.
Yeah, right? When you say look at it differently, you mean kinda look at it like a baby, right? Just like as
Yes.
if you're seeing it for the first time.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about how this changes as you age. It's very interesting because when you're a kid, everything is wondrous and the world is amazing, and then you get older, and even like for travel. So I'll bring up Atlantic City for example. I've been going to Atlantic City since I was a little boy, and I've been walking the same boardwalk and going to the same beaches. But now when I go down, I look at it differently. I kind of think about remember that when I was a kid and I first saw this beach and fell in love with it, right? But I've been there now that I'm older. I've been there so many different times. So in a way, it's like harder to have beginner's mind, but in another way, it's more beneficial and there's more enjoyment out of it.
Mhm. Yeah, it definitely, our stored memories can filter, our immediate experience. There's actually something kind of that can be very wonderful there. It can actually add to the experience, not limit the experience. I find, memories can work in both of those ways. They can just sort of put you on autopilot and you're like, "Oh, well this street's the same as it's always been, so I don't really have to pay attention to it."
Yeah.
That would be the negative way. But the positive way is you actually, while you're present, and this usually means that you are tuning into what's present fully, right? And then it's evoking, say, that first time you were there, and that's actually even adding and becoming a more rich experience because it's bringing in your past. Um, it's always about looking at everything, taking in all of your sense experience
Hmm.
fresh,
Yeah.
fresh, and that's harder. easier said than done.
Yeah, for sure. One of the quotes that from the book, Shunryu Suzuki, by the way, is the author of a very famous book. And I think one of the quotes is, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few.
Yeah.
And I found that to be very powerful. Let me ask you, what does that quote mean to you and how do you apply it?
Oh yeah, as we become experts, and most of us are motivated, to be experts in something. Our egos are reinforced by that. Then we have the fixed way of looking at something. We think we know what's going on, and we apply that. We apply that solution. My teacher, my Zen teacher, Shishin Roshi, who was a physics PhD and a corporate executive, um, he said there is nothing worse than the tyranny of the first successful solution.
Great.
I really like that phrase, right? So you do something and it works, and then you think, oh, this is the way it's done, right? So how many best practices in business, how many like people who've had some success in business, say that they've got the blueprint for the next problem or the next issue, right? Many,
Yeah.
right? So that and it tends to they're probably in on the second occasion, it's probably more often not the right, not the right solution, if you will, to that problem. Um, it's it Einstein kind of said the same thing, right? It's you can't fix a problem with the same consciousness that created the problem, right? So
Right.
the experts, like, really understand the problem. They, or
Right.
at least they think they understand the problem.
Right.
Right. And then, but you've got to shift out of, your kind of core beliefs, if you will. Shishin Roshi told me another, anecdote about being in graduate school in physics at Berkeley back in the 60s. And there was a Nobel Prize winner there who, he would come to these lectures, and he would, like, the visiting, PhD would give a lecture, and then he would ask these really basic questions, and like the whole auditorium full of students and faculty were like, they were almost embarrassed that this, like, big time physicist was asking such basic questions. But Shishin realized that, he was asking the core questions you need to ask about the first principles
Mhm.
of what the whole venture, was about, what the whole problem space was all about. That's beginner's mind.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you too about being an entrepreneur and being in business and how beginner's mind can help you. I do feel there are plenty of stories about companies that, they figured something good out and they just did it over and over again. And then things changed and they thought they were experts and the world changed around them and the companies didn't do well. Like
Yeah.
General Electric is just one that came to mind. They completely transformed their business and now they broke it apart and now they're doing well. But for a long time they had this blueprint and it changed. And so I think that, at some point someone took over there and said, I'm going to look at this with beginner's mind. We have a lot
Mhm.
of history and success, but things have changed. How do we reposition our company? And so, speaking as like an entrepreneur, and when you coach people that are executives, how can this help them, with their daily ups and downs?
Well, it's essential.
Yeah.
You have to look at the way I coach people is to what's at the heart of the matter. I guess that's how I kind of invite them into beginner's mind. What's underneath all of this? You're dealing with an issue, a problem, a personnel conflict. What Getting through all of the ideas, because usually we have, okay, well, I need to tell you about this is going to take me 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour to describe this whole problem that we have. Okay. And oftentimes it's necessary and important to talk about all the characters and the different opinions and shades, but always there's something that's at the heart of the matter. And the beginner's mind is going to look at that and say, oh, I see, for example, oh, you need to increase your sales. Okay, it kind of boils down to
Yeah.
that. What's kind of the bottom line here? Or, you've got a difference of opinion with this person on this particular matter, but usually that core question is obscured by a lot of other opinions and perceived conflicts and maybe personality conflicts that come in. So beginner's mind is that getting right to the heart of
Mhm.
what the issue is.
Yeah, and one thing that I try to apply this to is on the venture capital side. When I'm looking at a deal or meeting a new group, I'm really trying to take all of my preconceived notions out and just focus and listen carefully and pretend like I've never heard of this type of business before, even though I might have looked at 10 deals similar to this deal. But let me look at this one individually and let me pretend in my own mind that I know very little about it. Like,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that's very helpful because it allows me to have a fresh perspective on this particular opportunity. And also, it helps me ask questions. So and as a beginner, you're going to ask different questions as an expert. I've worked with some guys in venture that they barely ask any questions because they can look at the pitch deck and think they figured the whole thing out.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I've tried to look at it like, well, dumb it down. In other words, like explain to me your basic concepts and really try and form a fresh opinion about something. And I think that helps me evaluate companies and people.
That's an excellent approach. And I feel the most successful investors are ones who do that, right? They're going to have their own, and you may do this too with your groups. That you have a basic heuristic around what what are the metrics around a good company, what you're looking for, right? You want the good team, you want an idea for a good product market fit, those things. But that's just the agenda, that's just the table of contents, if you will, of what you're talking about. The way that you're investigating it with that spirit of inquiry is what really is going to get to the heart of their potential.
It also helps me, I think, as a learning tool, really. Like, in other words, like I love learning new things and I love learning about new people and new companies. And every time I meet someone new, I think they have something that I can learn from, and I may be older and more experienced. Most of the time I am older, but I feel like I can learn something from the other person that I didn't know before. So I approach it with like, every person. I read something interesting about like pretend that everyone in the world is an enlightened being except for you. Right. And I forget do you remember where that came from? I don't remember, but
I don't, but I really like it.
yeah. So I read it somewhere in one of my many books, but it's interesting because every single time I meet with someone new, whether it's work or otherwise, I feel like they have something that I can learn from. And I think that's part of the beginner's mind.
That's definitely part of beginner's mind. You may know the anecdote of Zen Master Joshu, Scott, where he practiced with Master Nansen for many years, and then Nansen passed away when Joshu was 60. And he said he went on pilgrimage for 20 years after that. And then he came back and he ran his monastery for another 40 years from 80 to age 120. But when he went off on his pilgrimage, and he's a really realized, Zen master at this point, he says, I'm going to learn and teach wherever I am called. And if I can learn from a 12-year-old boy, I will. And if I can teach an 80-year-old man, I will. It had no role or rank involved. It was just being present, fully present with whoever he would meet. There was another thing I wanted to say about beginner's mind, which is it gives us access. That is where the access is to our intuition, right? You look at the way babies or younger people before they know it, everything. By the way, you ever see this bumper sticker? I saw it once. Hire a teenager while they still know everything.
That's great. Right.
Yeah. I always kept that in mind. But before we know everything, before we become teenagers and we know everything, we're taking in the world with a very, at a very intuitive and emotional level. These kind of channels that get closed down later in life, and then we know everything, and then we know even more than
Right.
everything, and we all figured out, and we've got our expertise. But that spirit of learning, that spirit of openness, that curiosity, that beginner's mind is the doorway to these other forms of knowledge and other forms of information, intuition, if you will, that do get closed down by that knowingness of
Yeah.
the expert's mind.
I want to shift to family for a second, because you brought up like old and young, and it made me think of like, my mom is, 85 years old, and she's, she tells a lot of stories. A lot of them I've heard about 25 different times, but I know she likes to tell them, and she likes to tell me about the old days. And I feel like there's always some new information or some new learning that I can gain from it. So instead of saying, Mom, I've heard that story a bunch of times, I listen and I let her go through it because I know she enjoys it. But I also pick up some new information about her past, or something, some piece of advice or wisdom that she has. And I also appreciate the fact that, she's here and she can tell me these stories, right? I don't want them,
Mhm.
to be lost forever and so on. So it's like helping, my beginner's mind has helped me being more patient actually in these situations, and helping me get more out of the relationship as she's gotten older.
Oh, that's so touching, Scott. That's great. My mother's the same. She'll be 83 in a couple of weeks, and she's telling me things about her youth and her parents, my grandparents, who I knew quite well, fortunately, but things that I had never heard before. Yeah,
Yeah.
that things that are coming in, and even though maybe 80% of it I have heard before. So yeah, boy, ho- I aspire to listen with that quality, to everyone.
I also think on the other end of the spectrum is my children. And one of the things that, when my mom tells me, she's starting to tell me more stories about her mom. There's a lot of stories about my grandmother, right? And what I've noticed is that certain things that happened in her past have led her to be the parent that she is. She's an amazing mom. But I also like, again, with the beginner's mind, I'm like, well, maybe I can learn how to be a little bit better parent. I've been a parent for 26 years now, but maybe I can, next time I'm with my kids, I can take this little information and I can apply it to my kids, and I can give them a piece of wisdom. And so, and listen, I've been a dad for a long time, but you could always get better, right? Like,
Mhm.
you can always be better with your children. And so taking that wisdom from the older generation and passing it down, I think it's really helpful to have the fresh perspective. And I'm not an expert. I'm still learning how to be a good dad.
Yeah, it works in that direction, and it works in the other direction too. At least, I'm a more recent stepdad, but I've inherited 5 stepkids. And I take it took me a little while to get here, but now I take the position of just learning from them pretty much all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting what you went through too, because you also didn't, when you had the 5 children, they weren't babies,
Right.
so they already had been raised a certain way, and then new guy comes in,
Yeah.
and you provided actually probably new perspective for them, a lot of new perspective that they didn't have until you showed up.
Yeah, well, yes and no. They were all of the above. They were between 5 and 21 when
Right.
I came on the scene, and now they're 14 through 30.
Right.
Um, so I've been learning from them all along.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can definitely learn from our kids, and I appreciate that my kids are adults now, and they can teach me new things. And it's like, you don't want to be the parent that knows everything and
Yeah.
everything's got to be done my way and I know all the answers. That's where the learning comes in and the fresh mind comes into it. And I think that's helps me relate to them better actually, and also learn about like what's 20-year-olds, or what are they interested in now, right?
Yeah.
What happened with Taylor Swift's new album? I don't know, but my kids, I could ask them; they'll tell me.
Yeah. Are your kids opinionated?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
They are.
I think it's wild. I think it's great that they have such strong opinions, and I don't always share their opinions, but boy, do they express them really well. Like they
Yeah.
oftentimes sway me.
Yeah, and I also think that with the way they grew up with social media and cell phones has also changed the amount of knowledge. And like going back to like, I think I got my first cell phone when I was 30, right? Or something like that. And I figured out, wow, I can, access the internet in my pocket or something. But to kids these days, that's second nature.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like a brand new thing, and it really changed a lot, and the internet changed a lot. But, I wonder like what younger kids would say about this, like about what's changed in their life. That's, I think young people really need more beginner's mind is what I'm getting at.
Um, yeah, yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I think that it could also work that the knowledge is so accessible that they feel less of a burden of like memorizing things or
Yeah, that's true.
knowing things. And so we, back in our day, we would like be accumulating bodies of knowledge, partly for egoic reasons, to develop into who we were. Whereas now I think, people maybe the kids might be more fluid in some ways because of this. I don't know, the effects of these tools are just, they're very subtle and multi-layered.
Yeah. What how do you apply this? I want to get back to your coaching. And by the way,
Mhm.
check out Paul's coaching on his website, zenatwork.org, and sign up for Discovery and check out his newsletters. But when you are coaching people, does this come up? And how do you apply this kind of thinking to help them as executives?
Yeah, this definitely comes up. So in whatever territory, one of my clients is moving through, whether it's within an existing business or they're in a transitional stage, we always have these ideas about who we are, who we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to be doing, and what the problem is, right? That we just have these conditioned ideas that come from our past, and in some cases from our upbringing. So the descripting, I call it, the descripting, the deprogramming, the unwinding around the fixed ideas about how things should be or what my path is supposed to be like. That's right at the beginning of the work that I do with people. And there's big aha moments that come in the first few weeks when these core beliefs, these essential truths, core truths that we think, and they're sort of half conscious for the most part, right? It's like, of course I got to get a job, that pays me this amount within this period of time. It's like, well, actually, and then you spend a few weeks actually investigating that reality and you realize, no, that's not true at all. These things start to fall away. So they're like I say, they're quasi conscious. Usually they're partially conscious, but the openness that comes in those first few weeks when they recognize, okay, the problem is not the way I thought it was, and the solution is not the way I think it's going to be, and I can open myself to a radical, shift in functioning here. That's how I work with people, and it's really exhilarating.
That's very powerful, and you are really good at that, Paul.
Yeah, thanks.
Very good. And I also wanted to reflect on the group that we had, the Catalyst group, because what that did for me was open my mind about how other people, a lot of them, most of them are all your students, but they've all learned a little bit different way of doing things. And you encouraged us to share our vows, share our practices and our meditation. And I went into that with, I believe, very good beginner's mind. And I'm like, hey, I've learned a lot from Paul, but let me learn from, these other people. And certain things that I picked up during those sessions have made my practice stronger and made me look at things a little differently just because they were different people. We all have the same teacher, but we took the lessons in a little bit different way. So
Mhm.
that freshness of mind really helped me, grow, I think.
Yeah, working together with other people really helps with beginner's mind because
Yeah,
we realize we just tend to get fixed into our own views of the world,
yeah.
in this kind of solipsistic way. So hearing from other people, loosens those chains.
I also think travel is a big thing, and I think we talked about this on one of our other episodes about how, you get out of your bubble of where you live, and you see things from a brand new perspective. From
Yeah.
if it's a place you've never been before or a different country. So how does getting around the world or this country or even like in your own neighborhood, like how does going to new places really help you with this?
It's magnificent. It's the great, the great travel's the great enemy of prejudice. I heard that's a quote from someone. I'm not sure.
A great
Rudyard
quote.
Kipling, maybe. Travels. Yeah. So yeah, it just really blows away, your fixed ideas about things to travel through other places and immerse yourself in. Of course, we can keep in our bubbles when we travel, and that's a shame when people do that. But it's a great for those who have the opportunity to travel, to open your mind and become fresh again.
Yeah, and learning different cultures and different foods and different ways that people live. We to what you were saying earlier, like we're kind of brought up with this habit, and a lot of it we get from our parents, really, or our environment. And then you step out of that and you meet people from different places, and they look at the world a lot differently. They look at our country a lot differently. Like people, like I go other places and they have this perception of Philadelphia, and it's sometimes it's because of our sports fans or because of whatever, but I'm like, and then they visit here and they're
Mhm.
like, wow, like I really like Philadelphia, it's a great city. And because they just have this impression from the news or something. So I think when you get somewhere and you go to any town, I love to go to, whenever I'm in a different city, I like to just walk around sometimes and just
Mhm.
wander and even get lost and just look at buildings and go into a restaurant or a bar or something. And I think that's that freshness and beginner's mind of that city or that town that I'm in. It really does change my perception of things.
Scott, are you saying Philly really is the city of brotherly love?
Yeah, it is. It is, and some, believe it or not, there's a lot of cool people here.
That's great. I got to come visit you.
You do have to come visit, and I got to get out to Boulder because there's a lot more cool people out there for sure.
Yeah. 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 Well, your point's a good one. Is travel with an open mind is a, a, a nurturing ground, for this beginner's mind, and it needs to be nurtured. It needs to be stimulated. It needs to be fed in a nourishing way. In a way where we're actually, yeah, the qualities of beginner's mind have that sense of curiosity and joy and
Yeah,
wonder, even, right? We're
yeah,
bringing the wonder in. Where's the wonder in, like, applying your algorithm to fix the problem that you've solved 100 times before. The sense of wonder kind of gets lost. um but we want to, all of us want to, restore and reanimate, re-enchant our experience.
hmm.
um and beginner's mind is the way to do that.
How do you advise? What kind of advice do you have for people that are stuck on something? And we're all, I guess, stuck on one thing or another. But like maybe we're stuck on something that it's a habit that we've had or a routine that we've had. And how do you break that and get unstuck and look at things with the beginner's mind? Like, what is your advice?
Hmm. Well, I guess there's my answer. I've got a few answers to that. If it's a habit you're trying to break, then I would go to what I said earlier in the episode. You need a kind of a discipline of unhooking from that habit, becoming aware of it, and then creating a new habit, that, or routine, you could say, that serves you in higher capacity. Okay, like a meditation practice, say. Um, if you're stuck on a problem, like you're trying to figure something out and you're stuck on a problem, that you could just step away from it for a while. and
Hmm.
air it out and then come back to
Right.
it later. I think that's one way
Right.
to restore a beginner's mind. Another way is to actually just throw yourself into the question completely, body and soul, just really become the question, become fully
Mhm.
absorbed in it. So in that way you're kind of experiencing the question in a different way, not in your normal conceptual way, but
Yeah.
you're approaching it from a different angle. I would say this is beginner's mind, from say a more embodied angle or a more intuitive angle. Those are the things I'd say about that.
Yeah, and I do think that meditation is very useful here, as with all of this stuff, because I find that like, and I like to meditate in the morning a lot, like late morning or so. But I find that you wake up and you have all these thoughts going through your head, and when I sit down and meditate, I clear a lot of that out, and I breathe, and I think about how this is a different day, and this is a new day, and there's a new schedule, and there's new things that are going to happen, and a bunch of new emails are going to come in. And so like I might go to bed thinking about a problem or some work issue, which happens a lot, but then I wake up and I go, okay, this is a brand new situation here. It's not the same as
Mhm.
yesterday. And I achieve that through meditation, I think. And I find certain days when I don't meditate enough, or it's a short, or I don't have a good session with it, then I'm kind of a little bit stuck in yesterday sometimes, or
Yeah. Yeah.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
then when I come back to, okay, let's just look at today. Today is Wednesday. What's going on today, and tomorrow will be different. And I think that the more I've gotten into the meditation practice, the better that happens quickly, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that's really the power of it. And isn't it sweet how just slowing down
Yeah.
and sitting down and breathing can do that. It can open that quality of the newness of the moment, and make it alive for us. I think part of us, we resist slowing down and becoming still because we think it's going to be uncomfortable to
Yeah.
just have that maelstrom of thoughts and feelings without doing something about them.
Yeah.
We always think we have to do something about them, and there's something actually very avoidant about that. So we're basically avoiding our own life, we're avoiding our own presence, and we're putting ourselves into these places of difficulty, just by avoiding what might be just a momentary discomfort. It's
Yeah.
kind of tragic, actually.
Yeah.
Whereas if really just to settle in, like you say, every morning, just sit down for 5 or 10 minutes and
Yeah.
just be still. Don't avoid what's present for you.
Yeah.
um it robs all of that storm of overthinking and stress and worry and anxiety. It starts to defuse that of the fuel, which the fuel is coming from avoidance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think, and I love doing that. And the other thing is nature, and walking and being outside, I think is also another way to unhook yourself from things that are going on in your head. So I like
Mhm.
just taking long walks, getting amongst the trees. It always gives me a fresh perspective. And I always come back feeling like, I got some exercise, but I also cleared my head, and I, this concern or worry that I had has gone down a bit. It's because I'm looking at stuff and fresh. I'm just looking at the birds and the trees, and I'm approaching life a little bit differently because of that.
Yeah, the outdoors, it's constantly moving and changing. You mentioned impermanence, right? And then in our fabricated environments, we have this illusion of fixity, this illusion of stillness, or stability, fixity. So everything, the walls aren't going anywhere, the desk isn't going anywhere. It's all kind of fixed. But we walk out into nature, and every grain, every piece of grass, what's the blade of grass? Every blade of grass is moving, every leaf is moving, the air currents are constantly moving.
Yeah.
So that's the freshness that we're talking about.
Yeah, and it's also, it's like the freshness in my own mind, but also just with other people. I think it helps me with other people
Hmm.
when I look at them and really try and get to know someone new, and try and, no matter who it is, like I always love the Buddha's teachings about this, about how everybody, we're all the same. We all breathe the same air. We all eat and sleep, and all this stuff. And to look at somebody as a new person that you meet, and have that blank slate almost like in your head, and say, this is a new person. I'm going to treat them the same way I treat everybody else, and I'm going to learn from them, and I'm going to try and help them. And I think that's another way that you can apply beginner's mind to your relationships.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I came upon this research. It was research recently, and I posted on it on LinkedIn that being with other people correlates highly for higher happiness and higher meaning in your life. But when it comes to people, people you have close, intimate relationships with, it actually
Yeah.
correlates to higher meaning but less happiness.
Okay.
Which is kind of interesting, but also maybe you get it, because there's a lot of associations with your intimate partners with challenge and difficulty and strong emotions. Obviously there's a lot of positivity, hopefully, too, in those family relations and close relations, but there's definitely going to be challenge and these things. So as far as like, it's not uniformly positive with respect to happiness. But what you just said, is really important there. Can we actually meet our child or our parent or our friend or our colleague without the overlay of all of the things that we've gone through with them, and the challenges and perhaps some difficult feelings that we've had from them, and really be fully present with where they are. I don't mean to be in denial about those things, or to forget those things. They can actually still be present within your relationship, but don't
Yeah.
let them filter, right?
Yeah.
Get in the way of what's actually going on with the other person, right? How long, and this has happened to me too. I hate to say it, but somebody that I see every day, and they might be really sad or really in pain, and I'm thinking my wife is a good example, but I don't notice it,
Right.
for a while, right? Because I've got my
Right.
filter around what she is. Whereas, somebody else might walk into the room and immediately recognize, that she's got something going on. So that's real tragic. We all do that to each other,
Yeah.
but to allow that filter to drop and see others with beginner's mind is, that's where it's at.
Yeah, I think it's a practice too. It's something that I've gotten better at over time. And I learn from different people that are, to do this. I actually wanted to bring up just a quick, Bill Walton just passed away the other day.
Yeah.
And I love Bill Walton because he was NBA great basketball player. He was also a Deadhead, loved the Grateful Dead. But I've been reading all these tributes, and it's amazing how many people have said that Bill Walton treated them like, every time he saw them, it was like he was their best friend, and he was cared about them and asked about them. And he just was like a remarkable human being. And he touched so many people's lives. I've rarely seen a professional athlete that gets this much, praise. And I'm thinking, how do we learn from that guy? Like, he was just like a wonderful guy, because he really did care about everybody's, and he would, a lot of times he would change the focus off of himself to the other
Yeah.
person. And I thought that was pretty cool, because most celebrities, it's just about me, and I'm a star, whatever. But he wasn't like that. And so I just
I,
think, you can learn from stuff like that.
yeah, definitely. I've heard those things about him too. And I think it came through in his personality.
Yeah.
He's very much living in the moment.
Yeah.
And his commentary, like, I was
Yeah.
watching a lot of NBA when he was, one of the major guys on the broadcast, and he's so opinionated, but he was also totally in the moment,
Yeah.
and he could change his opinion
Yeah.
on a dime. He was supremely entertaining. He was very informed. And I think he met the world with a really big heart.
Yeah. Yeah, no, great guy, and appreciate learning from him, and just learning from a lot of people. I mean, I think that's what it's all about. Is that the more that you talk to people and learn from them, it just enriches your life and your own happiness and enlightenment.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this is a great conversation. Any final thoughts today, Paul?
Boy, this has been a good one, Scott. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do them all without any prep.
No
huh?
preparation. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it. And I think that you're so good to talk to, because like I could just bring up a topic and you'll just roll with it. And, I think that helps us, and hopefully it helps our listeners enjoy this podcast.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening. You can find us on all your channels that you get your podcast. Check out Paul at zenatwork.org and tune in soon for a new episode. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration into Zen Buddhism and its transformative influence on work and life. We hope you'll subscribe, share, and comment wherever you get your podcasts. May your journey be one of continuous growth and mindful living. From all of us here at Game of Zen, wishing you peace and prosperity on your path ahead.